Welcome to the Foundation for Water Research and SciWEM's Wastewater and Biosolids panel presentations. These presentations were given on the 14th of October and featured a number of speakers from around the water industry. The Foundation for Water Research and SciWEM bring speakers together 3 times a year for precisely knowledge sharing within the industry. Our 3 speakers today are Lila Thompson of British Water, where she's the Chief Executive Officer, who's going to be talking about AMP7 and the innovation landscape. Our second speaker is James Leverton of Ecom, who's going to talk about the use of BIM in the water industry. And our third speaker is Amey Khan of the Swan Forum, who's going to talk about the application of data as a service within the water industry, which is something he's doing a PhD study in his spare time on. So without further ado, we'll move to our first speaker, who is Lila Thompson of British Water. Lila is the Chief Executive Officer of British Water, which is a trade association within the water industry that promotes a lot of what the great things that the industry does. And Lila is going to talk to us about the recent water innovation strategy, what British Water does, and basically the importance of British Water within the water industry.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this meeting. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm going to put myself on camera if you want me to at the end, but I just think it's easier if you sort of focus on the slides. And then I'd be interested in your feedback throughout the presentation. So as Oliver said, I'm Lila Thompson, the Chief Executive of British Water. Been in the post just under 2 years, so you were absolutely right, Oliver. And I just wanted to set out the fact that and just remind people that we are a not-for-profit trade association. I describe us as dynamic because we change according to the times and what times we are in now. So we're constantly reviewing our services and trying to get feedback not only from our members but also from stakeholders and other organisations to drive what we do. We've got 200 members around consultants, contractors, manufacturers, and we now have 8 water utilities in membership. The reason why they join is because they like to get access to innovations and to better understand how they can engage with the supply chain in terms of their solutions and products. So we offer our services in 3 core areas, the UK, technical and international area. And what we do in the UK is we help to connect the supply chain to the water utilities and to other industries in the sector, and also help them to understand environmental regulations and policies. On the technical side, that's probably the area most related to this working group. What we do is we have 7 focus groups which look at different areas or specific areas of interest to the supply chain. So we have one on innovation. We have a micropollutants focus group, which is focused on organic emergent pollutants, such as pharmaceuticals. So it doesn't look at microplastics. We have a real-time monitoring group, a sustainable water management group, one on wastewater treatment plants, and you can see the full listing on our website. We also carry out the secretariat function for BIM for Water, so I'll be very interested in hearing the presentation following mine. And we also are the secretariat for the Grease Contractors Association, and that is an organisation of specifiers, installers and maintainers of grease management systems. So I just thought it would be helpful before I turn to innovation and the strategy is sort of looking at the landscape in terms of where we are now. So sorry about my slides. They seem to come through funny when I send them on. But basically, in terms of the landscape, we all know that the final determinations were issued by Ofwat for England and Wales, and that covers a £51 billion spend. Some of the water companies have gone to the CMA, and so we're watching closely what will happen as a result of that when the final decision is made. And then the Scottish regulator, so the Water Industry Commission for Scotland, has just released its draft determination for the strategic review of charges spanning from 2021 to 2027, and that anticipates a spend of 4.5 billion on water and wastewater infrastructure and projects. And then Northern Ireland has just released its draft determination. So the regulator for Northern Ireland Water has just released its price determination, and that's for the price control 2021. And again, that follows a same sort of similar period as Scottish Water for 2021-2027. And that anticipates a £1.7 billion spend. So innovation needs to be considered against this sort of backdrop in terms of what's happening in England and Wales, what's happening in Scotland and Northern Ireland, so the whole of the UK. Now, what we do as British Water is we organise water company liaison meetings to help stay abreast of what the water companies are doing and the current challenges that they're facing and any future solutions they're looking for. One of the things that I'm saying regularly to the water companies is that the supply chain or the supply community needs clarity on project delays, especially in terms of COVID-19 and that's impacts. And we need visibility of project pipelines. We also need to see statement of needs. Some of the water companies themselves have said that they struggle to actually specify what their needs are and push them out to industry. So we are trying to work with them to enable them to best do that, to adopt innovation into the industry. We are also going to be starting some roundtable discussions to see whether the current procurement model used by the water utilities is fit for purpose. And it'd be interesting to have your thoughts and views on that, if that's okay, Oliver. And then just to let you know that we have a COVID-19 supply chain impact survey out at the moment. We have a thumbnail on our homepage. So if you'd like to complete that survey, we have opened the survey to members and non-members because we'd love to understand how COVID-19 is impacting cash flow, revenue, staffing, so that we can then use that to help influence change and support the industry. So turning to collaboration in innovation, which I know is a focus, I just want to start by saying that British Water issues a survey every year, and that survey looks at the water company performance across 11 water and wastewater companies. So we ask 11 questions, and they're around things like innovation, procurement, communication. So how does the water company communicate effectively with the supply chain? Now, in the survey that we did last year, we got 256 responses. Innovation scored the lowest. And to some of you, that might not be a surprise. And that was around the questions innovation, the appetite for innovation, the process for assessing and adopting innovation, the overall speed to adopt innovation, and collaboration on innovation, R&D and testing. And the reason why there's an asterisk on the last bottom line is because that scored the lowest. So in terms of the supply chain, in terms of how they engage with water utilities, they think that collaboration on innovation, R&D and testing is the lowest and is performing poorly. So that's something that we've obviously fed back to the water companies and are trying to work with them on. So coming on to the innovation strategy, so we've responded, as hopefully a lot of you have, on Ofwat's consultations with regards to the £200 million innovation fund, which my chairman often says is the customer's innovation fund, because that's obviously correct. We've been feeding in our views, as have others, on the innovation strategy. The Centre of Excellence, we are pleased to see that it's going to be a virtual Centre of Excellence. So it's not going to be a new Centre of Excellence which is going to be established. And I'm going to come on to that. And hopefully that will be launched in the spring of 21. We are pleased that there's going to be a 2 million Innovation in Water Challenge. That in particular is going to be for small and medium-sized companies and startups. And Rachel Fletcher, in a meeting I had with her on Friday last week, said that supply chain companies should start talking now to water companies to get themselves ready and prepared to start putting in bids for that particular challenge. And then there will be the £40 million main competition, which will be launched in April 21. So at the moment, Ofwat's looking for a delivery partner. I believe the closing date for the tenders closed recently, and they're going to be looking at how the delivery of the fund will be governed, and all of that information will come through in due course. A lot of the times when we talk about innovation, we talk about the existing culture and the resources. So often when I speak to innovation heads in water companies, I'm aware that there might be a team of 3 or a team of maybe, say, 5 or 10. And some of my companies have often complained and said they're just not getting feedback in terms of their innovation, or there might be a trial held, but then if things go quiet. So I understand from the water company side that there might be a lack of resources, but we need to really make sure that moving forward there are sufficient resources in the Centre of Excellence to support the innovation strategy and the 200 million innovation fund. So just coming on to wastewater, just to let you know that this morning there was an event that was hosted by Acquia and the 19 water and wastewater companies that have worked together to produce the innovation strategy. So a lot of work has been going on in that area. And what has happened, and that followed the launch this morning of the final report, was that they stated and reiterated that the strategy goes up to 2050. In that strategy, there are 7 themes, of which 5 are really focused on wastewater networks, treatment and sludge. So the 7 themes are providing clean water for all, protecting and enhancing natural systems, delivering resilient infrastructure systems, achieving net zero carbon, taking a whole life approach to responsible consumption and production, and enabling diverse, future-ready people and partnership working. Now, the outcomes from the strategy will include resilient systems and improved customer experience, and also it should accelerate change and improved use of resources. So an objective of the strategy is to use less energy and have lower operational and embodied carbon compared to other solutions to achieve net zero carbon. So you can have a look at the final draft of the innovation strategy, which was launched, I believe, last week. The website is waterinnovation2050.org.uk, and I can type that into the chat afterwards. Now, an ambition for 2050 is for wastewater services to be environmentally sustainable. They want 0 uncontrolled discharges from sewers. They want emerging contaminants and lead to be dealt with effectively, causing 0 harm. And they want to maximise the recovery and reuse of resources to support sufficient resource availability for nature and society and achieve 0 waste. Now, I looked at the innovation strategy, the final copy this morning. So going back to the 7 themes and then the 4 that I've highlighted, from page 22, there's information in terms of the specifics around wastewater and biosolids. So I'll give you an example, and Oliver, you can tell me if I'm overrunning on time. But on page 22, focused on protecting and enhancing the natural systems, there is a chart, and it sets out the ambitions for the strategy for 2050. It provides short-term aims, the medium-term aims, and the long-term aims. So under short-term, what they want to see is a development of opportunities to decentralise wastewater treatment where appropriate. That's a short-term aim. A medium-term aim is for wastewater treatment to be effective and cost-efficient across the network. And then a long-term aim is for emerging contaminants such as pesticides, pharmaceuticals, plastics, and invasive species to be dealt with effectively, causing no negative impacts on the environment. So looking at page 22 in terms of protecting the natural environment, and also I'm scrolling down to achieving net carbon 0, they believe that through developing the digital enablers such as real-time control, that will help to move and treat water and wastewater effectively. And then, so that's a short-term goal. And in terms of the long-term aims, they want emissions from treatment processes to be minimised and improvements in nutrient recovery from wastewater and sludge to be achieved to a greater extent. So wastewater and biosolids features a lot throughout the innovation strategy document. In terms of the next steps, the plan is to spend more time looking at the Centre of Excellence, which will be a virtual Centre of Excellence. It's going to be a delivery vehicle for the innovation strategy. So what we were told this morning is that that themes are now going to be, the themes that I mentioned to you are now going to be used to develop challenge statements. So the 19 water companies will work together to develop some challenge statements, which will then be prioritised, and then these will be pushed out to industry. And Water UK they will be used as the platform to help pull this all together. So there's different elements going on. So Ofwat is looking for a delivery partner at the moment to deliver its £200 million innovation fund. We've got the innovation strategy, which was launched, and you can see it on the website. And I would encourage you to look at the 4 themes that are closely aligned with wastewater and biosolids. And then following that, the strategy is then, the people working on the strategy are working together on a centre of excellence, which will be, as I said, a delivery vehicle for the strategy. So what's going to happen is that a business case will be developed for the centre of excellence, and they will look at who's going to be involved in its governance, its finance, how it's going to be operational. And it's hoped that the Centre of Excellence should be operational in spring 2021. Now, I just wanted to end my presentation by looking at British Water's response to COVID-19. So we've been holding fortnightly Better Together calls, and we've had over 83 speakers over 28 weeks, which has included 10 water company CEOs and other senior leaders in the industry. And those calls are for leaders in the industry to brief the supply chain in terms of delays to projects as a result of COVID, what projects are coming back on stream, what delays there are to AMP7 or to Scottish Water Spend or to Irish Water Spend and so on. And it gets people to talk about the water industry's place in terms of building back better and our place in the green economic recovery. If you'd like to listen in on the call on Friday, which we have from 12 till 1, you can feel free to email me. So that's my email address on this slide, lila.thompson@britishwater.co.uk. Now, what I would encourage everybody in ending this is that the innovation strategy is a live document. They really want people to give them feedback, to engage with them. And I got the email address so that people can then give their feedback in terms of the strategy and how it's developing. And I really would encourage members of this group to stay abreast of what's happening with the strategy, really look at the pages that are relevant for your company, and feed that back to make sure that your company is getting to give its feedback on the strategy. But not only that, you can then bid to collaborate or for the innovation fund once that becomes live. So that's my last slide, Oliver, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for that, Lila. I think it's very interesting. I mean, I certainly found a lot interesting about that, especially the wastewater focus. We had a discussion this morning about fugitive emissions and how it's becoming more and more important. I certainly heard about nitrous oxide being an issue as a fugitive emission from the wastewater treatment work, especially from activated stuff. So that's certainly become an issue as we head towards that sort of environmental impact. And via Steve Palmer this morning, we're talking about the circular economy and how the actual circular economy, carbon zero, is going to make fugitive emissions more and more important. So I can see that's an area of innovation that needs to develop. When you start talking about real-time control and everything there, as you know, it's been a passion for mine for quite a few years. And I've loved the work that Stephen Trent has done at Spurnell, and I know Spurnell's now a test site, and Pete Vale can tell us a lot more about anaerobic treatment and the work that they've been doing there. The other thing we're talking about is that adoption, and I think for me, the great thing about the innovation strategy coming from all of the water companies is it gives the industry that direction. And it's certainly a direction I think that's been missing in the past, and I've worked for at least a couple of the water companies.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting from my point of view. Pete, you raised your hand. Peter, you should be able.
No, sorry. Oliver, but my question was just, as I don't know much about the strategy, there was reference to this panel. Is there a strategic sort of view on sludge to land or biosolids recycling? Because you mentioned biosolids features heavily. Is there reference to recycling to land, and whether this is a strategic view in the innovation strategy? Yes, yes, please.
Was that for me?
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's just I'm really having problems hearing.
I've got that.
I couldn't really hear the question properly.
Okay, the question
If you maybe could type it in,
biosolids recycling
maybe then I could address it, please.
Mentioned in the strategy document.
Right. I haven't seen biosolids recycling explicitly stated in the strategy, but I haven't read it line for line. But what I would encourage you to do is just check and see if it's in there. But I didn't see it when I was reading through it this morning and previously. But do have a look and see if it's mentioned. If it's not, then I would encourage you to email them and ask them where that fits in terms of the overall strategy and the themes, because the themes that they're working on are aligned with UCWEA's big questions, which you can see on the UCWEA website, but also they're aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, so the UN's SDGs. And there's a page, if you go to the end of the strategy document, you'll see all the themes, the ambitions, where they fit in with UCWEA's big questions, and then the UN SDGs. So you'll be able to see where it fits. But yeah, do have a look at that.
Okay, I think probably what we're going to do is get James speaking. He's actually got a limited amount of time. I think what we're going to have to do is run it through my mobile phone. So, James, do you want to give me a call on the number I'm putting into the chat, and we'll run it via the audio via my mobile phone. So thank you, Lila, and we'll probably come back if you're able to stick around. If not, we'll probably have a bit of a general conversation towards the end. James, get your slide deck up. You should be able to hear James now.
Hi, Oliver. Can you hear me?
Can everyone hear that?
Yep, that's good for me, thanks.
Good. I will get James's presentation up and I will run it, James.
Our second speaker of the day is James Leverton from AECOM. James is the digital expert for the water industry at AECOM and does a lot in water and power. He's going to speak to us today about the use of BIM in the water industry and an interesting case study he's done recently. Unfortunately, James is joining us by mobile phones. The sound quality isn't of the best, but we'll do his best.
For water, from a design and construction point of view, if we go to the next slide, perfect. So, the current state of industry, how I see it, is our clients, our water industry clients, they have a lot of assets, obviously, as we all know, they're all aging, and the documentation and records of those aren't necessarily for that. They're all in paper format, or a lot of them in paper format, in dusty old folders somewhere. And the assets that they have underground, which we can't see, are often not actually plotted on their system. So we often struggle when looking at those assets in particular about the location and biocriticality. So what we start to see as we get down to 7 is more and more of the water companies are looking to bring BIM into their company to by design, to hand over the right information, and they're giving a bit more of a steer of exactly how they see their business going and how we're going to take things forward. And one of the big, positives, but obviously not a positive, but coronavirus has certainly helped drive some of these digital tools and the implementation of these across businesses, as we can't meet face to face, for example, today. They're making the most of out things to our clients, they think it's a fancy 3D model. That is certainly a part of it, but it's more about that information in that model, how we store the information, how that information is structured. So it's all about sort of driving a cultural change. If you could click on a blog, I think there's some more text. So it's all about cultural change within an organisation, which should help enable collaborative workflows and make the whole process a lot more efficient. That's the next slide, please. So within bin delivery, bin level 2 or stage as it's referred to now, multiple dimensions. So obviously 1D, 2D, we're all very familiar with, I hope, such as 2D drawings or your initial ideas. And then to move down to 3D, which are the models and the shapes and data-rich models, all information and files or volumes of concrete and all that good stuff. We take it to the next step. We have 4D, which is that 3D model, which is related to the construction program. You can see your asset getting built over time. And then the next step from that is 5D, which is then associate costs, those elements of the model. And what that will do is that will give our clients a really good idea of their spend, when they're going to need to spend, and it should give a very accurate outcome of total cost. And if we just put the next stuff in there, where we really want to be is in 6D. So if you click the next button, please. 6D, this is where we want to be. So all of the good stuff we do from 1D through to 5D, that should eventually give our clients a really good understanding of the performance of those assets. And in the future, for the maintenance, when they're going to go in and replace certain bits of kit, and give a really good idea on how efficient that asset is. Next slide. So, initial challenges that our clients have, there is a lot of documentation that comes along with the BIM process, so it's really important that our clients have that in place, so that's from their organisation information requirements, which then helps feed their asset information requirements, which is really important, obviously. There's lots of benefits, which I'm going to talk about today in the design and construction, but the real benefits at the end, the asset performance and operation. And for each project we get involved with, our clients give us what's called exchange information requirements. And what that document does is tells us exactly what information they're expecting as part of our design and when they are expecting it and how that information should be structured. And then we formally then have to respond in what's known as a BIM execution plan, then say about our plans of how we are actually going to deliver what they are after. There are other investments in software, so I work for ACOM, as I mentioned, which I'm very fortunate. We have access to most software. So we can use the right software for the job. And as I mentioned, one of my previous slides, is the cultural change required for a whole industry, from our clients, consultants, supply chain. Everyone needs to be moving in the same direction. And as part of that, we need to upskill our staff. So that's one of the most challenging parts I find. We have engineers or operational staff which are used to working in a certain way, 2D drawings, for example, and it's really to get them away from that and start to look at models, markup models, and get all the information that is not the way in those models. And as an industry, we need to come back to sharing information between each other, between ourselves, because often we develop really good ideas, really good thoughts, but we don't share that information. I think moving forward, that's something that's going to have to come desperate doing. So at the heart of any project, what we need is a accommodation environment. That can be client-led, that can be consultant or contractor-led. And what that means is all of our information is stored centrally. So if you can see in the diagram on the top of that, the traditional method where we get emails flying around, key parts of information get missed, people don't see anything they necessarily need to see. So in doing that common data environment, all information is stored centrally, structured correctly, and the workflow that we have in place means that we can only share information at the right time to the right people. That information has been approved, it's been QA'd. No one is working on out-of-date information or information that may potentially need an abortive work and that's for complication. Next. This is the 3D modelling that we talk about, and a lot of people seem to think is thin, and it is a huge part of it. So what we can do is we use various software. So we use Revit for any structural work, Plan 3D for any complicated process type work, and then Visual 3D for any external work, any field calculations, sections through site. But where it gets really clever is we can then link our intelligent PNID to our model. What that enables is if we've got a piece of equipment or a valve or a pump or whatever in our PNID, it's not in our model, it's like that on something. It's not in your model, doesn't need to be there. And if it does, we can add it to the model. If not, it will delete it from the PNID. And running in parallel with that, we have up-to-date live builder quantities and equipment schedules. So when traditionally, again, we would tend to hand over drawings with itemized bubbling that each piece of pipe. Actually now we can hand over an Excel spreadsheet which has got everything in the model for the QSM store where they want plans to order. Next slide. Okay, so what all of the mentioned so far enable us to do digital design review. So we can use our model, which has got all of our model information linked into the model. So we can review, comment, and track changes throughout the design process. We can assign tasks to the design team and give them a date when that is completed. And as all of our models are data rich, it will even give about if you have a valve, if that valve is clockwise or anti-clockwise opening. And the live markup facility is great at the moment during the COVID situation. We can have Teams calls, we can have anywhere up to 20 people in the same model, make a comment, highlight areas that need work, or we identify clashes. Again, it's a great way to continue to develop design while we can't get face-to-face. There's also a huge reduction in costs we found from when we produce 2D drawings during design review. What tends to happen is we get to annotate those, and then when we go to the review, the client or operations will make comments, make changes, sometimes substantial changes, so there's a lot of course time and spent to annotate those drawings which aren't actually required post-meeting, so we get away from that and it's just a pure model. Next slide, please. I think the next one was a video, which is going to work. So the video was just a bit of an overview of how that digital design process works via Microsoft Teams and how we had a collaborative effort from ourselves, Scottish Water, and the supply chain looking at our model.
What I said
information we have from our clients, often it is hard copy, paper copy, not always 100% accurate. So what we do to ensure we are comfortable with the information we have, we can go out and we can laser scan any buildings that we're inhabiting, any site. And what that does, it gives us the confidence that our design will fit in this existing building, and we won't have any clashes with any potential, any existing structure or any existing kit that is predicted to remain. And what we can also do if we scan during construction is it will highlight any potential clashes in the future if something's been built out of tolerance or particular. And here we have just a couple of examples of some imagery from UAVs or from drones that they're more commonly known. These are a great tool for us. We can collect a lot of data very quickly. We can use the model to take dimensions. We can also use the LiDAR information to generate with surface profiles. If we're going to put a rising main in or got a reservoir return height, you can actually model what that will look like in our software from that information. We also use those for condition assessment of existing assets. Say, scaffolding, obviously any reduction in health and safety, without having access to the roof. And I think in the future with 5G, we'll be able to obviously use the drone footage and get a feedback straight back live to say a structural engineer in the office who can pilot to focus on various areas if there's more interest. So here's an example of the 4D sequence that I talk about. We have the model. What we can then do is link our model to a Primavera program or a Microsoft project program. And what that enables our team to do is just to double check buildability, ensure that we're not going to have too many teams working in the same area. It will also give program certainty to actually construct what we need to construct in the time we allow us. Our projects are shutdown period. It's a great opportunity to demonstrate that it can be done. And what the previous slide, the 4D sequence, what that allows us is, if, for example, we were to run that and we really were struggling to deliver the project in the timescales we had through traditional methods in situ concrete, what we can then do is we can then actually look at doing off-site modular, we call it at the moment. And what that enables us to do is build our tanks so that in the here we have some GAC vessels, and I know it's not wastewater, it's potable water. So they were constructed off-site and delivered to site and dropped in. The benefit from that is there's a huge health and safety benefit. It's predicted that 80% safer will be building in a factory than it would be to actually go out on site to build that. Significant program savings and reduces site waste of approximately 10-20%. In this example we have here, we actually got the vessels in stock on site, and when we went back and later scanned them, it became apparent that actually the vessels were built out of tolerance, and we were going to have a crash when we became a separate supply and drop the walkways in. So what we were able to do is then go back to the walkway supplier, and we've got this crash, here's the point cloud, we can redesign your access platforms around that. By doing that, we saved ourselves on quite approximately £6,000 when we look at the downtime and how to redesign and refabricate. Okay, again, was just a video just demonstrating those GACs being delivered. I think it's just to quickly talk about that is so we managed to deliver those 9 vessels in 5 days, and it's a very complicated layout with lots of pipe work and cable trays, and we had maybe 1 or 2 changes on site. So obviously all the hard work done up front from the modelling and running of the the 4D sequencing really did help us achieve the optimum time on site to deliver that. And yeah, moving forward to the future for our water companies. So now we have all these data-rich models, we can now easily produce the digital twins, which will assist water companies in predicting failures on their plant. And from there, we'll be able to generate a pretty good asset management strategy for our clients, which overall will reduce their maintenance costs, reduce outage times, and the other benefit from all of that together is that we'll then be able to feed that back into the National Digital Twin Programme. A little way off there with a lot of our clients, but hopefully by the end of AMP7 we should be in a pretty strong place. Next slide, please. And this is just the final slide, just to summarise what I've very briefly discussed. Sorry, it's been a bit quick. Yeah, it ensures that the right information is handed over. Across the program works, there's a huge savings can be generated from the modular design. And build it twice is really the key here, is a reduction in health and safety related incidents, program risk, and improved cost certainty. Next slide. I think I've got a slide for questions. Have we got any questions?
If everyone wants to chat, put it in the chat window if you can't talk. I don't think there are any questions, James. I mean, where do you see the future of BIM, James? Where's it going next? What do we have to do? How does it fit in with the innovation strategy almost?
I think where we need to get, obviously we've got BIM for water, which is doing a great job and trying to push all the water companies in the same direction. And the standardisation there, I think that we spend so much time different water companies because they've all got slightly different standards or different ways of working. So if we can standardise that across the board, I know it's a big ask, but if we can get to that space, then the savings for the whole industry will be huge. I think that will then, obviously, the more money we can save on the designs and the management of our assets, then obviously it's the better for everybody. I really think by standardising everything, that really will go a long way to help our industry.
I must admit, I've read a lot of the water company standards, and yes, they're all different standards on different areas of work. But when you compare and contrast them all, they're all pretty simple as well. Question from Lila: how much do you think the sector is embracing digital twins?
Sorry,
how much do you think the sector is embracing digital twins?
I think some water clients more than others. I think it's because it's so new to a lot of water companies. Obviously, we're not mandated, so we're a little bit behind the other sectors. I think once we sort of get halfway through the AMP, I think we'll really start to round hop, and everyone will see the benefits of the digital twins, and hopefully that will then get everyone driving towards reducing those parts, just as business as usual, really, and then hopefully get a feedback into the national digital twin.
I must admit, I'm from the digital twin perspective. I've seen the digital twin that they developed in Valencia for water network optimization. That took them 10 years to develop. I still think we've got a very long way to go to digital twins, and it does depend on what we mean for a digital twin, because I don't think the definition is actually very well defined at the minute.
I think at this stage it would just be the key sites almost, like your main wastewater treatment works, your main water treatment works, networks, and how they link. I don't think we'll be going into finite detail of each work. I think that information, but it's just too much. It will be a very systematic approach to it, for the foreseeable.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where it will go. From Tom G, how easy is BIM to interface where there is significant existing infrastructure? his experience with Plant 3D PNID is that it gets very buggy very fast if you don't follow its rules.
I think as long as we get that base data right, I think from a laser scanning point of view, that's brilliant. And yeah, I agree. Plant 3D is not always the easiest software to use, but I think if we get the right upskilling of our staff, and obviously the more and more experience we get, the more we start to use that tool when it becomes industry standard. I think obviously Autodesk, for example, will spend the money to improve that software. So we tend to interface with existing structures all the time. It just depends how much the client wants to see a digital twin of their site. You see what I mean? So we can do rough models that I've built. Actually, if they want to be in a space where they can accurately identify and be confident that they've got a digital twin of a site, then they need to spend a lot, fair bit of money to get in there, spend the time scanning it and getting someone to model the existing site. And obviously, water companies aren't overly too keen on doing that.
Our last speaker of the day is Amir Khan, who's the Executive Director of the Smart Water Networks, or SWAN Forum. Amir, in his spare time, is doing a PhD in the application of data as a service to the water industry, a subject that's very much at the heart of the current digital transformation of the water industry. So at that, I'll let Amir take over.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And for those of you not familiar with SWAN, it's a global nonprofit based in the UK, and we are the leading global hub for the smart water and wastewater sector, so really accelerating the use of these data-driven solutions. And today I'm going to focus on, like Oliver said, my PhD topic, which is really looking at this business model called data as a service. So if you look at a problem statement in terms of what is really hindering utilities from adopting sensors, big data solutions, we did a global utility survey, and two of the most common answers were that they struggle with data quality, and also they don't have the manpower to understand and process these analytics. So one game changer for that is this data as a service business model, which involves a utility outsourcing the operation and maintenance of a certain sensor to a technology provider, and they only pay for the data that they wish to receive. So there's a lot of as a service now, maintenance as a service, infrastructure as a service, and I think there's some confusion. But what is meant by a service model is that it's not just one technology, but more of a framework. And the end output you're really looking for is data quality. So how I defined data as a service in my study is a model in which a technology supplier is outsourced to operate and maintain certain hardware like a water quality sensor, flow sensor, level sensor to measure, collect, store, and transmit data, and the utility only pays for their delivered results. So today I just want to give a quick overview of my study, which is still in its early stages, and also a snapshot of some of the results. So in my survey, in my study, I conducted two surveys, one for wastewater and water utilities. So far, I have 45 wastewater and 56 water responses from 22 countries. The majority of the utilities do use online sensors, but a third of them are using data as a service. I'm also interviewing key stakeholders around the world, including global utilities, technology providers, and regulators. And some of the next steps that I want to take are to do a statistical analysis and look at specific case studies, data as a service across different sectors. So a really good data as a service example is Google Analytics. So this is a model that's used in basically every industry. So there's a lot that the water sector can learn. And looking at cases that are already out there, another aspect I'm interested in is the role of regulators to really incentivize utilities to adopt technologies and adopt models like data as a service. So the research questions I'm asking are, what are the main motivations for utilities and barriers to implement data as a service? Who is it suitable for? How do data as a service practices compare across different water and wastewater applications? Does it improve utility efficiency? What are they looking for in terms of the output? And ultimately, what makes a utility a good fit? So we say that data transforms, but really, who does that? And so some of the challenges that I've come across are, one, just not really understanding the model, or maybe not being offered it, but also in terms of needing to change utility mindset, in terms of professional pride, maybe a slow RFP process, also potentially labor unions because you're outsourcing instead of doing it in-house. There's also data ownership, cybersecurity concerns, and from a vendor perspective, there's a lot more liability on your end, especially for wastewater, which can you describe it as an operational hell, really trying to get good data quality. So those are some of the challenges that I've come across in these interviews. Some of the benefits are that DAS can be a CapEx investment, unlike OpEx, so not affecting customer bills. You're really shifting the risk of O&M, data transmission, data quality to the vendor. So some quotes I've heard are, we don't have the expertise. I only care about the end output, just give me the data. So really it allows utilities to focus on their core competency and not have to constantly adopt new evolving communication solutions. And like in the first chart, it's easier than hiring full-time employees. And it's also extensible and flexible, meaning that you can use it for different applications and you can pay if you want just by data point. So these are some of the summaries of the utilities that have taken it so far. And you can see that wastewater and water are pretty comparable in terms of public versus private ownership, the population they served. And that's because a lot of the utilities filled out both surveys. They were nice to do that. And then in terms of water and wastewater, it's a little hard to read, but in terms of the main barriers to preventing them from adopt data as a service, number one is that they have their own internal solutions. But second is, especially for water, is concerns about data ownership and cybersecurity. But when you actually talk to utilities that are using data as a service here on the bottom, red and blue show that it's less of a concern for cybersecurity and data ownership. So some of the reasons I heard are that, one, the data is encrypted. Also, utilities can have duplicates of the data in their own system. A lot of this information is public if people want it. And they really trust the contract. So if it's guaranteed that they can protect their data, they take the vendor's word for it. And then if you look at wastewater in terms of the applications it's being used for, it's predominantly CSO, but also for total wastewater system operations. And here on the bottom, it shows the motivations. So green and purple are ranked highest. So for wastewater, really ease of operation, reduced risk. Interesting, environmental compliance is not ranked as high as wastewater, and in water, even less so. In water, there's really a lot of different applications such as customer metering, leak detection, water quality monitoring. So these results right now are not statistically significant because I'm trying to find more utilities to do the survey, but it's an interesting just snapshot. And then when you talk about what kind of model they're using, so for water, it's more common to purchase the equipment and contract out the O&M, where in wastewater, it's more of a mix between purchasing and renting it. And for wastewater, in terms of end output, utilities are really looking for summary reports and predictive analytics compared to water where they just want the data and they can manage the rest themselves. So some of my discoveries so far are that water and data results are not the same. I think you can say that wastewater data is more complex and difficult to understand, why utilities would want more summary reports and predictive analytics than just the data itself. There are a lot of hybrid DAS models in terms of who's responsible for installation, ownership, who verifies the data, as well as the desired results. And like I said, some of the barriers are not necessarily real-life challenges. From the interviews, a lot of the commonalities between utilities using data as a service is that they're open to being a sandbox or a technology testbed. Data as a service, because a vendor is taking on all this risk, it has to be a long-term contract because the vendor might not break even till year 2 or 3. So everything needs to be really clearly defined, especially in the contract with service level agreements, so there's no misunderstandings. I've heard a lot that data as a service really leads to a strong partnership between utilities and vendors because there has to be this trust that they won't hold you blackmail with your data. And also, one interesting thing is that unlike models, which are based on projections and safety nets, data as a service allows utilities to really have real-time decision making. So data is the main driver, not models. So that's just a really quick synopsis. There's a lot more to go into, but I'm really open to hearing any questions or feedback.
So Amir, what do you need from utilities and the supply chain within the industry?
Yeah, so utilities, I have a short survey, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes for water and wastewater. And by taking it, they will have access to the global results, so really learning from those 22 countries. And for technology providers, just really learning if they have experience with this model, feedback from it. So I've been lucky enough to talk to a lot of SWAN members that have this model. And I feel like that there's a lot to learn just by sharing different examples.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Heather's just given me a prod that we need to start the Siren meeting at 2 because it's quite a packed agenda. Is there any last questions about any of the presentations from anyone? Do you feel you can either ask Amir directly? I'll certainly get in contact with Amir, with Lila or James about everything that's been discussed today. But there's quite a lot going on. So thank you very much to Amir, Lila and James. It's been some quite very fast and interesting presentations. Apologies again for the slight technical hitch we had, and I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation. I will send out a Google poll for the next meeting if anyone wants to join, and if there's anything you think people should be in on either the FWR meeting or these presentations, then please make a suggestion to myself. At that, I will hand over to Steve Bungay, who is going to chair the Siren session. So thank you very much, Amir. And yeah, thanks, Amir. Do get in contact with Amir. Thank you. So, Steve, do you want to...
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm happy to take over. Yeah, just a quick thanks to James, Lila and Amir.